On December 17, 1944, during a significant week in military history at a simple crossroads half a mile from Malmedy, Belgium, American soldiers who had already surrendered were lined up in a snowy field. Instead of receiving mercy, they faced a line of machine guns. In total, 84 prisoners of war were killed by the Waffen SS in what we now call the Malmedy Massacre. This was just the start. Not only prisoners of war, but also civilians in the next two towns became victims that tragic day. Today we will discuss what happened, how it spread to nearby towns, and what justice looked like in the trials that followed. If you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, please like this video and subscribe so we can keep highlighting the lessons of history. It starts during the last winter of World War II, when the Third Reich grew desperate and increasingly brutal. Hitler had little regard for the rules of war. He ordered his armies to fight the Americans in the West with the same intensity they had shown against the Red Army in the East. If the Allies expected mercy, they would be let down. The massacres aimed not only to kill, but also to instill fear and crush morale. This strategy was called the Ardennes counteroffensive, now known as the Battle of the Bulge. It was a bold and risky plan. The 6th SS Panzer Army under General Sepp Dietrich aimed to break through the flimsy American line and advance over Belgium, across the River Meuse, heading straight for Antwerp. If successful, this move might delay the Allied advance and extend the war in Europe for several months. Kampfgruppe Peiper, led by Joachim Peiper, was the focal point of this operation. The armored spearhead was told to move fast and capture bridges before the enemy could react. However, the best routes were not available to him. His unit was forced onto narrow secondary roads, which, if they failed, would hinder the mission's success. The screen fades from black to a snow-covered forest in Belgium. Snow swirls through the trees as the distant rumble of tank engines rattles the ground. It is December 1944, and Hitler has unleashed his final gamble in the West, the Ardennes counteroffensive. Behind the Siegfried Line, the 6th SS Panzer Army waits for its moment to strike. If they break through to Antwerp, the Allies will be torn apart. But if the attack stalls, Germany's last chance for victory will vanish in the snow. At the forefront of this assault is Joachim Peiper, leading a deadly armored column. His mission seems simple on paper: follow the infantry, capture towns and bridges, and move forward to the River Meuse. However, from the beginning, fate is working against him. The Losheimer Graben Bridge, which the Germans had previously blown up themselves, now obstructs his path. So Peiper has to search for another route. If the alternate crossing could support his Tiger tanks, his advance might have continued smoothly. But it collapses, costing him valuable time. Then there's Lanzerath. Only 22 American soldiers face nearly 500 Waffen SS paratroopers. This should have been a quick victory, but the defenders fight with remarkable courage, delaying Peiper for an entire day. If he had broken through swiftly, he could have gained momentum. Instead, his schedule falls apart. By midnight, his tanks are already 16 hours behind. Frustrated, Peiper expresses his anger. At Hansfeld and then at Bullingen, his troops not only seize fuel but also kill American prisoners. As a result, their westward march takes on a darker, bloodier tone. Crawling along icy, narrow roads, the column makes a wrong turn at Thierremont. The map said to turn left to Ligneville, but the tanks go right. That ill-fated turn leads them to the crossroads at Baugny, where history will remember one of the darkest massacres of the war. Moving toward the quiet Belgian countryside, the spearhead of Kampfgruppe Peiper reached the Baugny crossroads on December 17, 1944. Snow covered the fields, the air was still, and history was about to take a dark turn. Almost at the same time, a U.S. Army convoy of 30 vehicles from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion arrived at the junction, heading for St. Vith to join the 7th Armored Division. If they had passed through just a few minutes earlier, the crossroads might have been just another stop on their journey. But the Germans spotted them first. Piper's tanks fired without hesitation, destroying the first and last vehicles and trapping the convoy. Outgunned, the Americans surrendered, believing they would now continue the war as prisoners. The tanks rolled on, leaving the captured soldiers to be gathered in a farmer's snowy field. About 120 men stood together, uncertain but not afraid. If captivity had been their only fate, they might have endured. But then machine guns roared. Bullets ripped through the crowd. Men fell, some ran, and some pretended to be dead. SS soldiers walked among the bodies, delivering final shots. A few fled to a nearby cafe, but the building was set on fire, and none survived. 84 Americans lay dead, and Malmedy was forever scarred. Had it been clear who was responsible for Malmedy from the start, history could have condemned more quickly. In reality, the person who ordered the killings is disputed. By the time the killings happened, Joachim Peiper was well past the crossroads. Many pointed fingers at 1st Panzer Battalion Commander Werner Poetschke. Witnesses later identified him as the officer in charge who directly ordered the killings, shouting commands to his men. Whether or not Peiper said the orders himself, he cannot escape blame. He created an atmosphere where prisoners were seen as burdens, and mercy was rare. The forensic evidence confirmed that this was not a random fight, but a calculated killing. 20 bodies bore the characteristic signs of gunpowder burns on the head, the signs of close-range shots, coup de grace shots taken with deliberation. Whether by fire, bullet, or rifle, the shadow of Malmedy fell far beyond a white field of snow. The Malmedy shootings had been quiet for years, but their reverberations reached the courtroom at Dachau in the spring of 1946. Inside the walls of a defunct concentration camp, justice was called to account for the crime. The Malmedy Massacre trial, conducted between May and July, was a watershed. Who would be accountable for the killing of 84 American prisoners of war and the larger trail of bloodshed during the Ardennes campaign? At the center of it all sat Joachim Peiper, the up-and-coming SS officer whose Kampfgruppe had sliced through Belgium. By his side were Josef Sepp Dietrich, the commander of the 6th Panzer Army, and Werner Poetschke, commonly referred to as the man who gave the fateful command at Baugny. The court set down a fundamental principle. Commanders were responsible not just for their own deeds, but also for the climate of cruelty they tolerated. Dietrich tried to take cover behind Hitler's order. He testified that it was the Führer himself who issued the orders. No prisoners, no mercy, no compassion for civilians. But thus, the defense fell apart. Disseminating criminal orders did not exonerate from guilt. It ratified it. Had Dietrich or Peiper opted for humanity rather than for cruelty, Malmedy could have been just another Belgian village rather than a blemish on history. The Dachau trials delivered their verdicts sternly. 43 were sentenced to death, including Peiper and Dietrich. 22 received life sentences and 8 lesser terms. Justice appeared sure for a moment. But the post-war world was changing. Political pressure and the outbreak of the Cold War undermined once unshakable verdicts. Thus the sentences unraveled. None of the executions were ever to be performed. And while the convicted men returned to existences beyond prison walls, 84 Americans were still buried beneath the Belgian snow, their silence the ultimate testimony of all. The Malmedy Massacre was a war crime, to be sure. It was a betrayal of honor, a stark reminder that in war there exist lines that should never be crossed. If such atrocities are forgotten, the lessons they hold may be lost as well. So let's save them together. If this video caught your attention, respect the memory of those who have died, such as this video. Subscribe for more history, ring the bell for notifications, and share this story with others. And give us your feedback in the comments. Together, we ensure that history is never forgotten.